Hello, welcome to the next lesson. If you have not started this series yet, please go back and start with Book 1, Lesson 1. They're putting down their names, the Griffin whispered in reply, for fear they should forget them before the end of the trial. This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco. This is a reminder. Remember, cried translates to lloró. This is a reminder. Remember, put translates to poner. This is a reminder. Remember, make translates to hacer. Stupid things, Alice began in a loud, indignant voice, but she stopped hastily, for the blanco rabbit lloró out. Silence in the court, and the king poner on his spectacles and looked anxiously round to hacer out who was talking. This is a reminder. Remember, make translates to hacer. Alice could see, as well as if she were looking over their shoulders, that all the jurors were writing down stupid things on their slates, and she could even hacer out that one of them didn't know how to spell stupid, and that he had to ask his neighbor to desir him. A nice muddle their slates'll be in before the trial's over, thought Alice. One of the jurors had a pencil that squeaked. This, of course, Alice could not stand, and she went round the court in consiglio behind him, and very pronto found an opportunity of taking it away. She did it so quickly that the pobre little juror, it was Bill, the lizard, could not hacer out at all what had become of it. So, after hunting all about for it, he was obliged to write with one finger for the rest of the day, and this was of very little use, as it left no mark on the slate. "Herald, read the accusation," said the king. "This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco. This is a reminder. Remember, 3 translates to tres." On this, the blanco rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and then unrolled the parchment scroll and read as follows. "The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts and took them bastante away." "Consider your verdict," the king said to the jury. "This is a reminder. Remember, yet translates to todavía." "Not todavía, not yet," the rabbit hastily interrupted. "There's a great deal to come before that." "This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco." "This is a reminder. Remember, 3 translates to tres." "Call the first witness," said the king, and the blanco rabbit blew tres blasts on the trumpet and called out, "First witness." The first witness was the hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. "I beg pardon, your majesty," he began, "for bringing these in, but I hadn't bastante finished my tea when I was sent for." "You ought to have finished," said the king. "When did you begin?" The hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court, arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March. "I think it was," he said. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, added the Dormouse. "Write that down," the king said to the jury, and the jury eagerly wrote down all tres dates on their slates, and then added them up, and reduced the answer to shillings and pence. "This is a reminder. Remember, off translates to apagado." "Take apagado your hat," the king said to the hatter. "It isn't mine," said the hatter. "Stolen," the king exclaimed, turning to the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact. "I keep them to sell," the hatter added as an explanation. "I've none of my own. I'm a hatter." "This is a reminder. Remember, put translates to poner." Here the queen poner on her spectacles, and began staring at the hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. "Give your evidence," said the king, "and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the queen, and in his confusion he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Justo at this moment Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court. But on second thoughts she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her. "This is a reminder. Remember, next translates to proximo." "I wish you wouldn't squeeze so," said the Dormouse, who was sitting proximo to her. "I can hardly breathe." "I can't help it," said Alice very meekly. "I'm growing." "This is a reminder. Remember, right translates to derecho." "You've no derecho to grow here," said the Dormouse. "Don't talk nonsense," said Alice more boldly. "You know you're growing too." "Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace," said the Dormouse. "Not in that ridiculous fashion." And he consiglio up very sulkily and crossed over to the other side of the court. "This is a reminder. Remember, off translates to apagado." All this time the queen had never left apagado staring at the hatter, and, justo as the dormouse crossed the court, she said to one of the officers of the court, "Bring me the list of the singers in the last concert," on which the wretched hatter trembled so that he shook both his shoes apagado. "Give your evidence," the king repeated angrily, "or I'll have you executed, whether you're nervous or not." "I'm a pobre man, your majesty," the hatter began in a trembling voice, "and I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so, and what with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkling of the tea." "The twinkling of the what?" said the king. "This is a reminder. Remember replied translates to respondio." "It began with the tea," the hatter respondio. "Of course twinkling begins with a T," said the king sharply. "Do you take me for a dunce? Go on." "I'm a pobre man," the hatter went on, "and most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said—" "I didn't," the March Hare interrupted in a great hurry. "You did," said the hatter. "I deny it," said the March Hare. "He denies it," said the king. "Leave out that part." "Well, at any rate, the dormouse said—" The hatter went on, looking anxiously round to see if he would deny it too, but the dormouse denied nada, being fast asleep. "After that," continued the hatter, "I cut some more bread and butter." "But what did the dormouse say?" one of the jury asked. "That I can't remember," said the hatter. "You must remember," remarked the king, "or I'll have you executed." The miserable hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. "I'm a pobre man, your majesty," he began. "You're a very pobre speaker," said the king. "This is a reminder. Remember sat translates to sentado." Here one of the guinea pigs cheered and was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court. As that is rather a hard word, I will justo explain to you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag, which tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this they slipped the guinea pig, head first, and then sentado upon it. "I'm glad I've seen that done," thought Alice. "I've so often read in the newspapers, at the end of trials, there was some attempts at applause, which was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court, and I never understood what it meant till now." "If that's all you know about it, you may stand down," continued the king. "I can't go no lower," said the hatter. "I'm on the floor as it is." "This is a reminder. Remember replied translates to respondio." "Then you may—" "Sit down," the king respondio. Here the other guinea pig cheered and was suppressed. "Come, that finished the guinea pigs," thought Alice. "Now we shall get on better." "I'd rather finish my tea," said the hatter, with an anxious look at the queen, who was reading the list of singers. "This is a reminder. Remember put translates to poner." "This is a reminder. Remember without translates to sin." "You may go," said the king, and the hatter hurriedly left the court, Sin even waiting to poner his shoes on. "This is a reminder. Remember off translates to apagado." In the next paragraph, we are introducing a new word. The word door translates to puerta. "And justo take his head apagado outside," the queen added to one of the officers. But the hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the puerta. "This is a reminder. Remember next translates to proximo." "Call the proximo witness," said the king. "This is a reminder. Remember door translates to puerta." The proximo witness was the duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was, even before she consiglio into the court, by the way the people near the puerta began sneezing all at once. "Give your evidence," said the king. "Shan't," said the cook. "This is a reminder. Remember white translates to blanco." The king looked anxiously at the blanco rabbit, who said in a low voice, "Your majesty must cross-examine this witness." "Well, if I must, I must," the king said with a melancholy air, and after folding his arms and frowning at the cook till his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in a deep voice, "What are tarts made of?" "Pepper mostly," said the cook. "Treacle," said a sleepy voice behind her. "This is a reminder. Remember off translates to apagado." "Collar that dormouse," the queen shrieked out. "Behead that dormouse. Turn that dormouse out of court. Suppress him. Pinch him. Apagado with his whiskers." For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, getting the dormouse turned out, and by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. "Never mind," said the king with an air of great relief. "Call the proximo witness." And he added in an undertone to the queen, "Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the proximo witness. It bastante makes my forehead ache." "This is a reminder. Remember white translates to blanco." "This is a reminder. Remember much translates to mucho." Alice watched the Blanco Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the próximo witness would be like. For they haven't consigo mucho evidence yet, she said to ella misma. Imagine her surprise when the Blanco Rabbit read out, at the top of his shrill little voz, the name Alice. Chapter 12. Alice's Evidence. This is a reminder. Remember cried translates to Loro. This is a reminder. Remember such translates to tal. This is a reminder. Remember much translates to mucho. Here! Loro Alice, bastante forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen onto the heads of the crowd below, and there they lay sprawling about, reminding her very mucho of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before. This is a reminder. Remember put translates to poner. Oh, I beg your pardon, she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could, for the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and poner back into the jury box, or they would die. The trial cannot proceed, said the king in a very grave voice, until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All, he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as he said so. This is a reminder. Remember put translates to poner. This is a reminder. Remember right translates to derecho. This is a reminder. Remember much translates to mucho. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that, in her haste, she had poner the lizard in head downwards, and the pobre little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, being bastante unable to move. She pronto consiguió it out again, and poner it derecho. Not that it signifies much, she said to ella misma. I should think it would be bastante as mucho use in the trial one way up as the other. This is a reminder. Remember much translates to mucho. As pronto as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who seemed too mucho overcome to do anything but sit with its mouth open, gazing up into the roof of the court. What do you know about this business? The king said to Alice. Nothing, said Alice. Nothing whatever? Persisted the king. Nothing whatever, said Alice. This is a reminder. Remember white translates to blanco. That's very important, the king said, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on their slates when the Blanco Rabbit interrupted. Unimportant, your majesty means, of course, he said in a very respectful tone, but frowning and making faces at him as he spoke. Unimportant, of course, I meant, the king hastily said, and went on to himself in an undertone. Important, unimportant, unimportant, important, as if he were trying which word sounded best. Some of the jury wrote it down, important, and some, unimportant. Alice could see this, as she was near enough to look over their slates. But it doesn't matter a bit, she thought to ella misma. At this moment, the king, who had been for some time busily writing in his notebook, cackled out, "Silence," and read out from his book, Rule 42, all persons more than a mile high to leave the court. Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles high," added the queen. "Well, I shan't go at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now." "It's the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "This is a reminder. Remember yet translates to todavía. This is a reminder. Remember white translates to blanco. There's more evidence to come todavía, please your majesty," said the Blanco Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has justo been picked up." "What's in it?" said the queen. "This is a reminder. Remember white translates to blanco." "I haven't opened it yet," said the Blanco Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king, "unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. "This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco." "It isn't directed at all," said the Blanco Rabbit. "In fact, there's nada written on the outside." He unfolded the paper as he spoke, and added, "It isn't a letter after all. It's a set of verses." "Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?" asked another of the jurymen. This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco. No, they're not, said the Blanco Rabbit, and that's the queerest thing about it. The jury all looked puzzled. He must have imitated somebody else's hand, said the king. The jury all brightened up again. Please, your majesty, said the knave, I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end. If you didn't sign it, said the king, that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man. There was a general clapping of hands at this. It was the first really clever thing the king had said that day. That proves his guilt, said the queen. It proves nada of the sort, said Alice. Why, you don't even know what they're about. Read them, said the king. This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco. This is a reminder. Remember, put translates to poner. The Blanco Rabbit poner on his spectacles. Where shall I begin, please, your majesty? He asked. Begin at the beginning, the king said gravely, and go on till you come to the end. Then stop. This is a reminder. Remember, white translates to blanco. These were the verses the Blanco Rabbit read. In the next paragraph, we are introducing a new word. The word gave translates to deal.